Hey, welcome back everybody for another video today. So today we are going to be talking about capitalism and why you probably don't hate it nearly as much as you think you do. So let's go ahead and get to the elephant in the room. I'm not gonna lie to y'all, it's been difficult to make the last few videos. Well, not the ones I recorded, but like the ones that you haven't seen yet. Like, it's a series. We're doing 8 videos in this first season, right? And yeah, these last few videos have been difficult to make. And the reason why they've been so difficult for me is because I'm one of those type of people that, like, when it comes to, like, name your top 5 or do a list or do that or whatever, right? You struggle at the end because it's like, man, I could pick this or I could pick that or I could pick that or I could pick this. So, like, literally the last few videos, I had it in my mind what I wanted them to be. And I've literally just erased them off of my whiteboard and was like, nah, I want to talk about this. Nah, I want to talk about that. Nah, like, it's just all these things. I'm like, I think this is a valuable topic. I think that's a valuable topic, yada, yada. But I will go ahead and say it right now. And I pray I don't change it again. So this video, I'm going to talk to you about capitalism, and I'm going to talk about how it's essentially a mask now. Capitalism is nothing more than a mask, and you don't even see the real face. This is philosophical, but we'll get into it. The next video, spoiler alert, is going to be about Jonathan Oddie, because I just felt like the timing was right. And it's a very crazy case that I feel like I don't even remember it when it happened. So if you know who Jonathan Oddie is, then yes, we're talking about that in the next video. If you don't know who Jonathan Oddie is, don't look up Jonathan Oddie, because I'd rather this be your first impression at this point. So just have patience and we'll talk about Jonathan Oddie. The video after that, I'm not going to give it away, but I will say Jonathan Oddie video is going to be a springboard jumping into the season finale of this one. So sit tight. Other than that, we're talking about capitalism and how it's a mask on the real economy today. So let's buckle up. Capitalism, right? If you live in the United States, you definitely understand to a degree what capitalism is. It's part of your reality, to be honest with you. And you may hate it, you may love it, I don't know. But I'm gonna say, funny enough, even if you love it, it still is not what you think it is in today's age. But before we get into what it is, what it ain't, I'm going to provide you with a definition of what it is. I'm not going to lie, I don't remember where I got this definition. It's either Merriam and Webster or like the other famous one, I forgot. Sorry, but it's an official definition. That's all you need to know. So what is the definition of capitalism? Capitalism is an economic system characterized by private or corporate ownership of capital goods, by investments that are determined by private decision, and by prices, production, and distribution of goods that are determined mainly by competition in a free market. Free market is very important. So, on paper, right? And what it actually started out to be, this is what capitalism kind of was in the beginning. It's a free market, right? I can be my own boss. You can be your own boss. He, she, we, they, them, we, us, whatever can be their own boss, right? And we can do that freely and openly. And if you notice back in the day, it seems like a lot more mom and pop shops existed, right? And we know that to be true, right? We know that mom and pop's joints used to be everywhere back in the day. People supported themselves. People were their own bosses. They had their own businesses, their own economy, damn near their own trades, right? So what happened? How did we get here nowadays? We've gotten to a point now where, to be honest with you, most people are even fearful to try to be their own boss. It's a scary thought, and I can't blame people, right? It really takes a lot of courage in today's economy to believe in yourself, because you're always going to be David, right? And I feel like you're David going against Goliath with no slingshot. It sucks, right? It sucks to go out and try to start your own business nowadays. For a lot of people, it could seem a lot more risky than it is to just, work for some type of big corporation or some bigger business. So again, how in the hell did we get here? How did we get to this point? Well, again, I'll say this. When it comes to the economy, a lot of it is philosophical, a lot of it is trial and error. But I will say we are going to talk about another form of economy that I believe, in my own philosophical way, I believe it, that this is what we are experiencing now. So when I say you don't hate capitalism, what I mean is you hate something else called corporatism. So what is corporatism? Just to make sure I give you the clear, concise definition, I will go ahead and read it off to you like capitalism. Corporatism, the organization of a society into industrial and professional corporations, serving as organs of political representation and exercising control over persons and activities within their jurisdiction. Wowzers, heavy stuff there, eh? So, I personally believe this is what we are experiencing now. And very similar to technocracy, if you go back. Technocracy itself, they even mentioned, this is not an official government, right? It's more or less like an overlay, or I guess you could say an underlay of a government, right? It has characteristics of itself kind of injected into what we would consider as the official government without being the official government. And I feel like corporatism, in a sense, is very similar. It's not the main form of the economy, right? But like I said before, capitalism is the mask overlay over corporatism, right? And because of this, it makes it very difficult for us to understand what is actually happening, right? Because like I said, when people say that they hate certain things about capitalism, you aren't actually speaking about capitalism, believe it or not. Capitalism started out is it's supposed to be something that is almost an equal, opportunity for all of us, right? You go out, you buy, you sell, you trade goods, right? And you can be someone that participates as being a person that sells goods, right? It all makes sense. All good on paper, right? So somewhere along the way, it kind of fell off the rails, right? And you started seeing that the rich get richer, and it's just way bigger of a climb for anyone else to try to get up to that top, right? That's been happening over decades now. Well, there is a man named Maynard Keynes. Maynard Keynes is someone we're going to talk about for a moment because Maynard Keynes is an individual who kind of springboarded all of this and kind of made it to where we are the way we are in today's age and society. Maynard Keynes is an English economist and philosopher and started gaining notoriety during the Great Depression. So, of course, during the Great Depression, it was depressing, right? And Maynard Keynes started having these philosophical ideas about economic policies and changes that could happen and could take place. And essentially, the best way I want to describe it is he wanted to have almost a second player to the United States economy, right? So his philosophy was, when it comes to United States citizens, y'all are a bunch of brokies, right? Y'all are a bunch of brokies, and you cannot be trusted to uphold the United States economy when the chips are down. When we have a recession and when we have a depression, how in the world could we comfortably rely on you to uphold the nation? We can't, because you're broke, right? You're broke. You're not going to have anything to go out and stimulate the economy. How could you? It literally doesn't make sense. So he came up with another idea as to who could come in and who could save the economy. Now, you should know, at the time when he was pitching these ideas during the Great Depression, believe it or not, in the beginning, he actually had a rough time trying to sell this. A lot of people were not on board with his ideas. They were like, yo, bro, like gone somewhere with all that. Don't nobody want to hear that. But it started to gain traction right before World War II. So I know at this point you're thinking, what in the hell could he have been talking about? What was his idea? What was he pitching? We'll get to it. Slow down there, Speedy. He ends up meeting up with President FDR after a while. There was a guy named Felix Frankfurter that reached out to Maynard and told him, you know what? You should hit up the president. You should hit up FDR. And he did, which I think is crazy that you could just do stuff like that back in the day. So Maynard Keynes ended up writing emails to FDR. FDR ended up replying back, so they're writing love letters. How cute. And they end up realizing that they have a lot in common when it comes to economic policies and their vision for the new future. So FDR tells him, hey, I'm working on this thing called the Great New Deal. And then, of course, Maynard was like, yo, I like your style. That sounds dope. Cool. I'm working on a few things too. And Maynard was working on a book, right? This book was called The General Theory of Employment, Interest, and Money. And it was essentially Maynard's breakout moment, right? This was his breakout moment as an economist, was making this book. So, if you ever want me to do a deeper dive into Maynard Keynes or some of the philosophies of this book, go ahead and let me know. But I'm going to let you know right now, this is the kind of timing the book was on. The book essentially said, I don't know, I just find this crazy. The book said inflation can be used as an additional hidden tax to manipulate people into spending more money and giving the government more money if necessary or if needed, or if they just want the people to do that. So that was the book's essential thought process behind inflation. And again, this was written, damn near a century ago. So this is your reality, people. How do you like those apples? So, of course, on paper, right, it all sounds good, right? It always sounds good on paper, I guess, except that the whole, inflation is nothing more than an additional hidden tax. That don't really sound good on paper. But, whenever we have these terms, everything sounds good. The government essentially will come in and be a backup plan, a safety net for the economy in times of hardship, which, by the way, that's what this was all about. That's crazy, right? His plan, Maynard Keynes' plan, was that the government itself would step in and be the economic big player in the United States whenever the recession or the depression kicked in. So in other words, yes, if we get into a recession or a depression, kaboom, kablam, all of a sudden war. Yes. All of a sudden war. However, what started happening over the decades, though, is they were like, well, you know what if we're not in war? How else could we continue this marriage between the government and the economy? And these are many things that we're seeing nowadays, is different politicians finding different ways and cutting corners to figure out ways to make things beneficial. And this is where capitalism starts eroding, because when you have people in power that can literally make laws or kill laws with a stroke of a pen, and all of a sudden they're finding financial gains off of this, well, things start to get a little tricky, right? And it gets weird, and we're talking about insider trading. We're talking about ways that make the common man or woman, don't want to go down that rabbit hole, difficult to become their own boss, right? Because at this point now, it's more mutually beneficial for politicians to have people that are billionaires and to have gigantic corporations that they can lean on, because one, they can essentially control them to a degree, right? I pass the law. I can tell you what you can or cannot do, or what you can or cannot sell, how you can or cannot sell, where you can or cannot sell. Two, I can make money off of it. It's beautiful. It's beautiful, right? So this is where corporatism comes in, and as the definition stated, there is somewhat of a mutual beneficial take with it, right? With the government and the big corporations being in bed together. But that's where the problems come in, because me, as a regular consumer, I don't fit into any one of those categories. I'm not in the government, and I'm not a big corporate CEO business person at C-level that could make these decisions and benefit from this. So where do I fit into this? I fit into the part where they talked about the inflation, right? And it being an additional tax on my head to serve them, essentially. That's where I fit in. That's probably where you fit in. So, hello, neighbor. We are helping everybody else get rich except ourselves. Crazy, right? So that's where I wanted to, really start letting you guys know, like, you don't hate capitalism as much as you think you do. But I will say this, though. Capitalism, in a sense, if you ever seen the movie Gremlins, it's almost like that, right? It's like capitalism in itself is kind of cute and furry and adorable. It's still a monster, but it's a cute and adorable furry monster. But You start feeding it past midnight and watering it, and all of a sudden now you have corporatism. So I can't completely sit here and say capitalism doesn't have its faults. Every form of an economic strategy or philosophy does. There's no perfect solution, right? Same thing for governments. There's no perfect governments, right? But as we can see, this is what happens when you start overfeeding the beast. This is what happens when it gets fed past midnight, rada, rada, rada. It turns into a monster, which is corporatism, which is what, in my opinion, what we are truly in, right? Everybody is making money. Everybody is shaking hands behind closed doors and making shady deals behind your back, and you are paying for it. Lovely, right? So for a split moment, I decided I'm going to change gears on you, and I'm just going to tell you some stuff that, in my opinion, should piss you off a little bit. But, you know, let's get into it. So for this portion, I'm going to be looking down and reading because I want you guys to just think about this, right? So let's speak about some of the politicians that have somewhat been caught making gains from these kind of strategies, right? Let's look into it, right? So Mitch McConnell's wife owns stocks in Wells Fargo, Vulcan Materials, and Ingersoll Rand, and together they have a net worth of $24 million, which, by the way, if you're a true politician, you shouldn't probably be making $24 million. You shouldn't have that in a net worth. Just gonna be honest with you. And then, of course, going down, Nancy Pelosi's husband. And if you notice, a lot of these people are not the exact spells, right? Because if it was Nancy Pelosi, if it was Mitch McConnell, then they would probably be under investigation for insider trading, which is illegal. That's what Martha Stewart went to prison for. So, but that's, again, where it comes in, right? That's where it comes in with these loopholes. And that's what people have noticed is, you know, you're probably making benefits you shouldn't. So again, Nancy Pelosi's husband owns stocks in roughly 24 companies. I wasn't going to list them all, but some of the big ones include Tesla, Nvidia, CrowdStrike, Micron Technology, and REOF, which I think is some kind of real estate company or venture capital or something. Anyway, his net worth is roughly $250 million with a B dollars. Rand Paul's wife made a trade that was heavily criticized at the time because in February of 2020, so basically a month before lockdowns, she bought stock in Gilead Sciences, you know, like I mentioned, right before the lockdowns. So interesting. And then, of course, Steve Cohen has traded stocks on roughly 34 different companies, including IBM, Boeing, Toyota, Eli Lilly, and Microsoft. He's claimed that he does believe he's done everything. He hasn't done anything corrupt or wrong, and that all of his purchases were, you know, no insider trading involved. He did it all on his own. That's what he claims. So according to him, he's flexing, he's bragging, he's boasting. He's like, hey, you can audit me, you can investigate me, whatever, bro. Nobody gave me this information. I did it all on my own. But it's stuff like that is where it gets very muddy in the waters, because this is why they say they don't want politicians making trades, because it's like, if you are the ones, you know, that can write a policy to make a company, you know, more profitable or less profitable, you know, depending on how these policies and business could affect them, it's not right for you to also say you can, you know, buy shorts or buy calls, you know, like you can't do that, right? That's very manipulative of the markets itself. However, as we can see, the workaround is I didn't buy the stocks, you know, my spouse bought those stocks. You can't say I had anything to do with that. They're their own free person. They're not a politician. They can do what they want, right? And then if you go back to, of course, the Bilderberg Group, you know, video where I talked about a Chatham House rule. By the way, if you haven't seen that video, go back and watch it. I'm not going to explain the Chatham House rule, but I want you guys to know every video I make, which is why I'm getting so particular about the ending videos, like I mentioned earlier, every video I make kind of has a little piece of it from the last video. Like there's certain things, I hope I'm stringing this shit together for y'all. is all I'm getting at. And you'll even be proud of me. When it came to the politicians, I picked 2 of the blue flavors and 2 of the red flavors so nobody would cry in the comments about how I'm biased about one political party or the other. I picked 2 of the blue flavors, 2 of the red flavors. But in total, though, you should know there are 97 of these politicians, 97 of them, that have been caught red-handed doing sketchy stuff like this. Everybody's out here making money, making gains, making deals, except you, except me. That stings a little bit. But yeah, that's essentially corporatism. Corporatism, in my opinion, is what we are currently in. Yeah, as you can see, there's signs of it all around, and I'm not gonna lie to you, I don't really have a solution as to what we should do about it. It's very tricky because what can you do other than advocate for stricter policies on politicians to do the right thing when it comes to this, right? We have it to where they are essentially generating a military complex for profits. And this is supposed to be to help you and I out so we don't end in a recession or depression. So in other words, there are many flaws to our economy. There are many flaws to our government. And instead of really trying to fix it and, repair it, they're just kind of putting patches on it. But most importantly, they are profiting off of it while many of the common, average, everyday United States citizens are drowning trying to figure it out. And again, like I said, if it doesn't freak you out knowing that they literally talked about in Maynard Keynes' book that inflation is nothing more than an additional tax on you. It's an additional tax on you to just squeeze more money out of you for no reason. It's tough in the streets, ain't it, man? It's tough in the streets. But essentially, that's the video. I just wanted to talk to you about how you probably don't hate capitalism nearly as much as you thought you did. Essentially, it should be a lot better. It should. Capitalism should be a lot better. It should be easier for you to be your own boss. It should. It just should. But it isn't because there are roadblocks and there are hurdles in the way. No matter what people tell you, get off your ass, pick yourself up by your bootstraps, blah, blah, blah. Like, don't get me wrong, it's still possible. You just really, you really got to have a bulletproof plan. And you got to be able to be number one in a market, which sucks because it wasn't really like that back in the day. If you wanted to do what somebody else was doing, you kind of could. You just had to find your own little space to do it. But you could do something else. Nowadays, you literally have to make fire again for the first time somehow. But yeah, that's essentially the video, y'all. Like I said, next video is going to be over Jonathan Oddie. Be on the lookout for him. If you don't know who he is, don't look it up. Save it for me. I got your back. Other than that, I hope you guys have a fantastic day. Have a beautiful day. Thank you for tuning in. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.